Hello, how are you doing? Welcome to another installation of Books to Battle Your Brain Rot. I am crawling out of my depths of confusion and being a little bit lost while simultaneously trying to navigate the internet. And I made the video a couple of weeks ago about books to battle brain rot, and everybody seemed to really enjoy that. So I wanted to make a follow-up of even more books that I found as I was really ruminating and thinking about books that helped me or really created a dialogue in my own mind. I wanted to add to the list that I already made, so let's just keep going. The first book that I want to talk about is a book that I feel like I talk about semi-often on this channel, but maybe not enough. I just want to reiterate how important this was for me when I first read it, Regarding the Pain of Others by Susan Sontag. Now, a lot of people know Susan Sontag on camp, on photography, just a really great meditation on so many different niche subjects. In this book in particular, Sontag is investigating images and drawings with these very dark connotations to them. For example, she's talking about Napalm Girl in Vietnam and what that image instigated in people's minds, what that image did for people, representation of pain in media, representation of how people are suffering. And it's a really darkly kind of cosmic book, but really makes you think about how we perceive people suffering. Do we just flip through onto the next page? Do we just, in this day and age, do we just scroll past it? How are we navigating a world where pain is so prominent in media, and it's even something that garners probably the most clicks, garners the most attention, headlines, people crashing, people, celebrities going crazy. Those are the things that unfortunately we're most attracted to. I was actually watching a documentary once about the inception of the National Enquirer, which is a magazine based here in the United States. And if my memory serves me correctly, the gentleman who started it, he would follow crashes, like crash sites, and he would report on them, and he realized how popular that these crashes would become, how popular these stories would become. And that is how this really kind of debaucherous magazine came to be. It was because it was just like the worst of the worst that was being profiled, and people just couldn't get enough. So Sontag's book is just a really little sliver of commentary about that, but I think about it so often, and I just think it's a great way of profiling like the pain that we, for some reason, we seek. And it makes me, it relates so much to the internet. The things that get the most clicks are the things that have the most horrendous titles. We frame things to be more negative than positive. Full transparency, if I make a video talking about more of a negative subject, I know that I'm going to get more clicks than a positive subject. It's just the way of the world right now. And unfortunately, it's something that has been going on for a while. So really great, really, really interesting and fascinating idea that she's delivering, and I highly, highly suggest that. Any of Jon Krakauer's works. I talked about the philosophy of walking, being outdoors a lot in the last video that I made. Jon Krakauer was my breaking into that world. You wouldn't believe it, but I was not an outdoor reader before Jon Krakauer. Oleg actually picked up a Jon Krakauer book. It was like the best of Jon Krakauer. He wanted to read it. He didn't end up reading it. I ended up reading it, and I loved it so much. But I have since read a couple of his other books, Eiger Dreams, Into Thin Air, but I'm a huge, huge, huge advocate of Jon Krakauer's work. I think that he highlights not even the glamorous parts of being an outdoor explorer. I think he talks about just the reality of why people seek solace in nature, why people go to the extremes in these extreme sports, like hiking Everest before it became the huge phenomenon that it has become now, why people were doing that, why people were truly risking their lives. I remember when I read Into Thin Air, I got really invested in watching documentaries about people who survived. Into Thin Air is chronicling a disaster in the 1990s that Jon Krakauer was a part of. A lot of people lost their lives, and there was one gentleman, he was from Texas, he has frostbite all over, but he managed to survive, and he was giving an interview after it, and he was talking about how basically to climb Mount Everest is one of the most selfish things in the world. You are spending so much money, and you are going with the guarantee that if disaster strikes, you will be left behind. I think that Jon Krakauer just highlights how sometimes you have to be a little bit selfish when you are embarking on these conquests, but just the ultimate freedom that it gives your mind and spiritually where you are. Yeah, I just love his work, and I think if you just really want to disconnect and be inspired by people who are challenging the norms and really just finding peace with nature, it's a great Great read. I have nothing but positive things to say about his books. And to talk about even more nonfiction, I'm going to enter in a little category called Dad Knows Best. This is for my dad. I know he's watching, so hi, Dad. Love you so much. You're the reason I don't swear on this channel. My dad is probably one of the least brain-rotty people that I know. And he has 2 books that I've since read because of him, and that he reads a lot. He's the reason that I read. He's always been a huge proponent of reading, and I'm so happy that he passed that on to me because it's what I do and what I love now. But my dad has always loved Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I read this when I first moved to New York City. I think I was a little bit too young. And do I think I really had a handle on a lot of the themes that it was investigating? No, not necessarily. But he quotes this all the time. The certain pillars of information that he learned from this book is just something that he aligned with so much. I mean, it helps that my dad drove a motorcycle across the country multiple times and is a insane learner by books, but this is a book all about quality. A philosophical book for sure. I mean, it was huge in the 1970s, but I think there are values in this that hold. And again, if we're talking about brain rot and the way that it permeates into our life, this is a book all about quality and the way, if you're a passive or an active mind. It profoundly shaped my dad in a way. My dad is so intelligent. I really respect any of his opinions that he gives me, and he's always encouraged me to be an individual. And I think this is a book that really shaped him. Again, I read it when I think I was a little bit too young. I would love to revisit it, but I know if you really just want to step back and focus on yourself and what you're contributing, this is a book that I think would really help with that. And the second book that I want to talk about that my dad and I have in common, and we talk about it all the time, is A River Runs Through It by Norman Maclean. This is a fiction book, but if we're talking about outdoors and the impact of being outdoors, fly fishing, Missoula, Montana, which if you aren't aware, Montana is one of the most beautiful states in the United States. I truly think it is just like a little haven, and this book really just holds a special place in my heart. I think if you really just want a meditation on, again, solitude, something that I talk about a lot on this channel, this is a great book. Not really for everybody, but I think that everybody can get something out of it. And that is what makes an important and great book. And again, my dad loves them, so I have to just give my dad a little plug because he's really a wonderful mind and he's passed on a lot of knowledge to me. So love you, Dad. So after that, I want to talk about some poetry. I'm not a huge poetry girl, but I think that poetry is something that is accessible for people. I also think if you really want to extend your mind, poetry is a great place to start, because truly you're getting just excerpts of somebody's mental landscape. They're giving you little pieces of a puzzle, and your mind is just sent to extrapolate on the rest. And I think one of the best examples of poetry, and it's truly like finest form, is Ariel by Sylvia Plath for me. Now, I love Robert Frost as well, but I feel like I've talked about nature so much that I might have to let that kind of go. Also, great poet. We love Robert Frost, also very close to where I'm from. Ariel by Sylvia Plath is just such a biting and sad bit of poetry because it was published either posthumously or right before she passed away. And you can just really see the crumbling of her mind, and the infrastructure of her emotional state is just on full display. And I think that that is what makes a great poet. You truly feel everything that she's going through. And as somebody who's not a huge poetry fan, I felt parts of her that I didn't even feel in The Bell Jar, which is her novel talking about being committed into a psychiatric ward. I felt something in her poems in a way that was just so visceral and I think important for her. And now, I mean, it's very eerie, obviously, since she's passed in such a horrific way, but you really felt something in there. And I think that poetry has a special place if you are trying to navigate a world where it feels like information is just given to you. I feel like poetry is a place that you have to work for the meaning that works for you, and I felt like Ariel by Sylvia Plath was very effective in that. Okay, and now we're going to talk about just a little classic, but a book that I feel like taught me a lot of lessons. And again, if we're talking about brain rot, AI slop, excess, greed, wealth, How Much Land Does a Man Need by Leo Tolstoy is a perfect examination of greed and excess, and why do we keep on pushing when we know the fundamentals of what should make us happy. This is essentially just an exploration of a man who is given the task that if he walks a certain distance, he can have all of that land, but he has to be back by a certain time. And as you can imagine, how much land does a man need? The title says it all. It kind of gives you a little input into what is going to happen. It's so small, it's accessible. I think everybody can read this, get something out of it. Again, very similar to poetry. It's what you get out of it, but I think it's very on the nose that greed. Why do we need so much? I recently had to log back into Instagram, and I hadn't been on it in such a long time. I had deactivated my profile, but I logged back in, and oh my God, I was just bombarded with excess and ads, and it just felt like everything. I was on like this communal shopping website, and I didn't, like, it freaked me out. Obviously, you need things, do what makes you happy, but really, you don't need much. And I think oftentimes when we're on the internet, we feel compelled to compare ourselves to others. I'm guilty of that. I'm so guilty of that. Superficial things don't matter. You don't need much. You need love, you need family, you need friends, and you need your mind. And I think that those are the most important things. Everything else is just maybe a benefit of that, but you don't need much. And this is a great little book to just remind you of that. A real lesson to be learned. Hopefully this isn't too preachy, but I think that one's a pretty standout as far as understanding that you don't need much. Okay, now we're going to do some rapid fire fiction, some fiction books that I think are, let's call these convoluted fiction. Let's call these fiction stories that you have to work to understand what you're getting out of them. Not necessarily stream of conscious, though one definitely is, and it's not my favorite, but I'm putting it on here because people like it. So let's just start with that. The book that I think is very intelligent, maybe a little too intelligent for my mind, but I know that a lot of people like this author and like this particular book, and I think that it does serve as a great imagination stimulant, and that is Pure Color by Sheila Heti. This is all about the inception of the world, kind of being reborn, love, association with colors. It really feels like a fever dream, and I've said it before, but I'll say it again. You know, I love to repeat myself. If you have seen Terrence Malick's Tree of Life, this feels like a reinterpretation of that. I don't know, that was just the imagery that I was getting from this book. I almost remember the associations, the imagery that I had associated with this book much more than the actual storyline itself, which I think is great. I think that this book served that purpose for me. Did I necessarily remember everything that happened in it? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Not my favorite book, but I got something out of it. I really was diving into my imagination and diving into like the tunnels of words that Heti was creating. And I think that that is what made this effective and something that I can suggest as like a world building exercise for if you're feeling like I can't imagine anything except for watching AI SLOP ASMR videos, which is devastating to me as an ASMR lover. They do not need to exist in this world. There's so many people with great voices. Stop it. The second one that I want to talk about is a book that I just read and I loved it. I thought it was so sexy, different, fun, and bold. Let's throw bold out there. And that is Orlando by Jacqueline Hartman. It was my first Hartman. I loved it. I've never read Orlando by Virginia Woolf, but it's, from my understanding, like a very gender bending work. I also just saw, if you're in New York City, I'll link the tickets down below, but an actor that I've worked with, him and his daughter, are putting on a show called Orlando, an homage to Virginia Woolf's Orlando. It's only going to be running for a little bit in the city, but if you go, tell them that I sent you. It's worth seeing. He's a great actor. They both wrote it together, and it's a really strong piece of work if you like Orlando. I haven't read it, but I loved Orlando, which is a loose interpretation of Orlando. It's all about a woman in France who, she's struggling to read Orlando, and she sees a gentleman on the train, a guy in his young 20s, and part of her just splinters off and she jumps in and inhabits his body. So introspective in a way. You really start to, as a woman, I felt a lot of kinship to the main character. And I think it's a really great meditation on the differences between men and women and how we navigate life, and maybe the freedom that you feel when you inhabit somebody who's totally radically different from you. It really made you think. I think that the imagery, again, was right there. You were able to visualize these characters, and a lot of great internal conversations without being something that you get lost in. I was very nervous that this was going to be very heady. Wow, I'm just thinking of Sheila Heti, but very heady in your head, and it wasn't that. It was a great linear story and a really good ending. Like, yes, she ended it, and I appreciate that. I want to talk about a book that I read this year, and this is from Archipelago, which is the same publishing company that put out Cockroaches by Scholastic Mukasanga, which was in the last video that I made. I would say that all of the books that they put out are really, really effective in just conjuring up different ideas, a lot of translated works, which I really appreciate. But this book is a general theory of oblivion. I had never heard of this book. I picked it up because it was an Archipelago book. I got it from the Goodwill, and I was so excited to see that it was in perfect condition. I picked it up and I read it this year. I was almost a little intimidated at first because I had no idea what this book was about, but wow, what a weird cast of characters, and you are forced to really put together all the pieces. It's a small book. It's not really that dense, but you are forced to put all of these stories together. And I think that that is what makes this like an anti-brain rot book, because you do have to really think. This takes place in Angola during the Angola Revolution, essentially centered around a woman who locks herself in her apartment for years without people knowing that she's living there. She's hiding during the revolution, and she is visited by this boy who basically breaks through, climbs up, and discovers that she's there. And it's all about these like little side quest stories, these little side characters, these kind of flamboyant characters in a weird way. I don't know why, but I envision this to be like a French movie, similar to Amélie. The way that that's filmed, I figure that everybody might have like these very obtuse characteristics, even though that's not what's on the page. I haven't read anything like it since. I thought it was great character building and an odd world that you're entering into, and really a story like no other. So definitely anti-brain rot for sure. Okay. And now we're on to the last category that I'm going to call memoir, and probably the most polarizing book that's going to be on this list because of what it is. But I just listened to this on audiobook, and I am ready to read it again. You might be a little shocked that this is on here, but hear out my argument for this. Down the Drain by Julia Fox. Now, if you don't know who Julia Fox is, she is a person who I would say exists because of the internet. She basically came to prominence because she was dating Kanye West, but she existed for a very, very long time before. She was in Uncut Gems, if you know that meme. I had no opinion about her, and frankly, I basically judged her based on the clips that I would see online of her. I didn't really care. I was like, oh, she's funky, she's weird, whatever. Do I agree with everything that comes out of her mouth? Absolutely not. But I think that she is a perfect representation of this world that we exist in online, of just clickbait, satisfactory moments of just judging somebody online when you know nothing about them. I listened to her memoir, and even if 5% of that was true, you can't help but be happy for her that she was finally able to tell her story. God, I mean, you really just look at somebody through an Instagram post or a celebrity headline, and you think you know everything about them, but you really don't. And I think it's a testament to anybody who exists online, even yourself, when you look inside yourself and you think, okay, I want to be perceived this way online, but nobody's really going to know the authentic version of you. And this book was so illuminating for me. I thought I knew who this person was. I thought she was a Nepo baby that lived in New York City and just had this comeuppance because she crossed paths with the right people. But really just the adversity and the struggle, and really just the uncomfortable situations that one goes through. And I had to kind of check myself, I had to kind of check myself and say, we think we know everything and we really don't. Yeah, that really changed my perspective on a lot of things. And I think it's a great, fun audiobook. I imagine it's great to read it as well, but it taught me something about myself that I think I needed to learn. So hopefully I can impart that on you as well. So anyway, guys, hopefully you enjoyed that little updated list. I enjoy making these because it really gives me a chance to have a full conversation about a lot of things that I'm passionate about, and hopefully these open up a world for you. Again, as always, let me know what books helped cure your brain rot or that you think are stimulating and interesting, because there's so many books out there, and books will always be a great place to escape to. So, you guys are wonderful. You're fabulous. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you in the next one.